The transport shuttle made a soft humming sound as it docked with the Galactic Diplomatic Station. Ambassador He-Jin pressed her face against the small window and looked out at the massive space station floating in the dark void. Stars twinkled, like tiny diamonds all around them. She had dreamed of this moment for years. "First time on a galactic station?" asked the pilot, a friendly human named Captain Park. "Yes," He-Jin replied, clutching her travel bag tighter. "I still can't believe they chose me." Captain Park smiled. "You'll do fine. Just remember, not all species out there are as welcoming as us humans." The shuttle doors opened with a hiss. He-Jin stepped into the docking bay and immediately felt different. The air smelled metallic and cold. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors. This place was nothing like Earth. A tall, silver-skinned creature approached her. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against metal. "Human Ambassador He-Jin, I am Commander Zeth of the Velthrian Empire. I will show you to your quarters." He-Jin bowed politely, the way her grandmother had taught her. "Thank you, Commander Zeth. It's an honor to meet you." Commander Zeth did not bow back. Instead, he turned and walked away quickly. He-Jin had to hurry to keep up with his long steps. As they walked through the station, He-Jin saw incredible things. The walls glowed with soft blue light. Creatures she had only seen in textbooks floated, crawled, and walked past them. Some had scales, others had fur, and some looked like they were made of crystal. "The Corvani live in Section 7, Commander," Zeth said without looking back. "They are warriors. Very loud. The Nexari occupy Section 12. They believe they are the smartest beings in the galaxy." "What about humans?" He-Jin asked. "Humans live in Section 3, with the other lesser species." He-Jin felt a sting at those words, but she kept quiet. She was here to build bridges between species, not start fights. They stopped in front of a metal door marked 347. Commander Zeth pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open. "These are your quarters. The common recreation area is next door. Try not to disturb the other residents with primitive human activities." Before He-Jin could ask what he meant, Commander Zeth was gone. Her new home was small but clean. The walls were gray metal, and there was a bed, a desk, and a small bathroom. Everything looked the same as every other room on the station, cold and empty. He-Jin unpacked her bags slowly. She pulled out photos of her family and placed them on the desk. Her parents smiled back at her from the frames. She took out a small plant her mother had given her and set it by the window. Then she pulled out her most precious possession, her grandmother's old recipe book. The book was old and worn. The pages were yellow with age. Her grandmother Min Seo had written all her favorite recipes in it during the Korean War. He-Jin ran her fingers over the handwritten words. Even here, millions of miles from Earth, her grandmother's love felt close. A loud crash came from the next room. He-Jin could hear angry voices speaking in languages she didn't understand. She pressed her ear to the wall and listened. "The human has arrived," said a deep, growling voice. "I saw her bowing like a weak creature." "Humans always bow," replied another voice that sounded like wind blowing through caves. "They have no pride, no strength." "At least they are quiet," said a third voice that buzzed like an insect. "Not like the Corvani who stomp around all day." He-Jin stepped back from the wall. Her heart felt heavy. These beings already hated her, and they didn't even know her name. She looked around her gray, empty room and made a decision. If this place was going to be her home, she would make it feel like home. He-Jin found the small kitchen unit hidden in the wall. It was basic, meant only for heating pre-made food packets, but she had learned to cook with much less. During her training on Earth, she had practiced making Korean dishes with simple tools. She connected her personal food storage unit to the kitchen. Inside were ingredients she had brought from Earth: rice flour, honey, sesame oil, and other spices. The diplomatic service had allowed her to bring them for cultural research purposes. As evening came, Hee-jin began to cook. She mixed rice flour with water and honey, just like her grandmother had taught her. The smell of sesame oil filled her small room as she shaped the dough into small cookies called yakwa. While the cookies baked, she rearranged her furniture. She moved the desk to create more open space. She hung colorful cloth from earth on the walls. Slowly, the gray room began to feel warmer. The sweet smell of baking cookies drifted through the air vents. Hye-jin smiled as she remembered baking with her grandmother. Minseo always said that food was love made visible. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a young human man standing in the hallway. "Hi, I'm Taeho. I work in the communications department. Are you baking something? It smells amazing." Hye-jin smiled. "Yes, Korean honey cookies. Would you like to try one?" Taeho's eyes lit up. "I haven't had real Korean food in months. The food synthesizers here are terrible." She invited him in and gave him a warm cookie. Taeho closed his eyes and smiled as he ate. "This tastes like home," he said softly. They talked for an hour about Earth, their families, and their hopes for working on the station. When Taeho left, Hye-jin felt less alone. But as she cleaned her kitchen, she heard more voices from the common area next door. "What is that disgusting smell?" asked the buzzing voice. "It's coming from the human's room," replied the growling voice. "Probably some primitive food ritual." "The smell is contaminating the air recyclers," said a new voice that sounded like digital music. "This is unacceptable. We should file a formal complaint." Hye-jin listened to their angry words, but she didn't feel sad anymore. Instead, she felt determined. Tomorrow, she would continue baking, and maybe, just maybe, she would offer some cookies to her angry neighbors. She looked at her grandmother's recipe book and smiled. Minseo had always said that the best way to change someone's heart was through their stomach. It was time to put that wisdom to the test. The space station was big and cold, and full of beings who thought humans were weak. But Hye-jin had something they didn't have: her grandmother's recipes and a heart full of hope. As she fell asleep that first night, the sweet smell of yakwa still lingered in the air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, her little corner of the galaxy smelled like home. Hye-jin woke up to the sound of angry footsteps in the hallway. She checked her watch. It was 6 in the morning, station time. Someone was stomping back and forth outside her door. She got dressed quickly and opened her door. A massive creature stood in the corridor. It looked like a giant bear, but its fur was dark red and it walked on 2 legs. Sharp teeth showed when it spoke. "You are the human," the creature growled. "I am War Chief Grax of the Corvani. Your food smells made my warriors sick last night. They could not sleep." Hee-jin bowed politely. "I'm sorry, War Chief Grax. I didn't know the smell would bother anyone. I was just making cookies." "Cookies?" Grax snorted. "What are cookies?" "They're small sweetbreads. My grandmother taught me how to make them. Would you like to try one?" Grax stepped backward like she had offered him poison. "Corvani warriors, do not eat human food. We are not weak like you." He stomped away, leaving Hye-jin standing alone in the hallway. She sighed and went back inside her room. Later that morning, Hye-jin reported to her new office. The Human Cultural Department was small and tucked away in a corner of the station. Her supervisor was a tired-looking woman named Director Kim. "Welcome to the most ignored department on the station," Director Kim said with a weak smile. "Your job is to promote human culture and build friendships with other species. Good luck with that." "Has no one ever been interested in human culture?" Hye-jin asked. Director Kim laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Last year I tried to organize a human art exhibition. 3 beings showed up. They spent the whole time. talking about how primitive our paintings looked compared to Nexari light sculptures. Heejin spent the morning reading reports about failed cultural exchanges. Every human attempt to share their traditions had ended in embarrassment. The other species always found something to criticize. At lunchtime, Hyejin decided to try a different approach. She packed a small plate with yakgwa cookies and walked to the main cafeteria. The cafeteria was huge and full of strange creatures eating even stranger foods. Some ate glowing liquids. Others chewed on what looked like metal bars. A few didn't seem to eat anything at all. Heejin found an empty table and sat down with her human food pack and her plate of cookies. She had barely taken a bite when Commander Zeth appeared at her table. "Human ambassador," he said in his metal-scraping voice. "I see you brought your primitive food rituals to the public dining area." "They're just cookies," Hyejin said. "Would you like to try one? I made them fresh this morning." Commander Zeth's black eyes stared at the small golden cookies. "Velthrians do not consume food for pleasure. We take nutrition tablets for efficiency. Your baking shows how backwards humans are. You waste time and energy on unnecessary activities." "But, don't you enjoy the taste of food?" Hyejin asked. "Enjoyment is inefficient," Commander Zeth replied. "Velthrians have evolved beyond such primitive needs." He walked away, but Hyejin noticed he looked back at her cookies twice. A few minutes later, a new creature approached her table. This one looked like it was made of living crystal. Light moved through its body in beautiful patterns. "I am Crix, of the Shardani Collective," it said in a voice like wind chimes. "I could not help but notice your food items. They are very irregular in shape." "Yes, they're handmade," Hyejin said proudly. "Each one is a little different. Would you like to try one?" Crix made a sound like breaking glass. Hyejin realized it was laughing. "Handmade food offends our geometric sensibilities. Shardani consume only foods with perfect mathematical proportions. Your random shapes would disturb our harmony." Crix floated away, its crystal body flashing with what looked like amusement. Hyejin was starting to feel discouraged when a cloud of glowing gas drifted over to her table. The gas formed into a rough shape of a person. "I am Whis of the Nephili," the gas creature said in a voice like whispers. "I sense you are offering solid food to other beings." "Yes," Hyejin said. "These are cookies. They're sweet and—" "Solid food consumption is barbaric," Whis interrupted. "The Nephili transcended physical eating eons ago. We absorb energy directly from radiation. Your primitive chewing and swallowing disgusts us." The gas cloud swirled away, leaving behind only a faint, glowing trail. Hyejin sat alone at her table, looking at her untouched plate of cookies. Every species had found a different reason to reject her offer. She felt tears starting in her eyes. "Having a rough day?" Hyejin looked up to see Taeho sitting down across from her. "I just wanted to share something nice," she said quietly. "I thought food might help us connect with other species. But they all think we're primitive." Taeho picked up a cookie and took a bite. "These are delicious. Don't let them discourage you. Most humans stop trying after their first week here." "Maybe they're right," Hyejin said. "Maybe we are backwards compared to them." "Or maybe they're missing something important," Taeho replied. He looked around the cafeteria. "Look at them. The Velthrians sit alone and never talk to each other. The Corvani argue constantly. The Nexari think they're too smart to make friends with anyone." Hyejin followed his gaze. He was right. Each species sat in separate groups. There was no mixing, no conversation, no laughter. "When was the last time you saw any of them smile?" Taeho asked. Hyejin thought about it. She had never seen any. Aliens smile on the station. "Maybe their efficiency has costs they don't see," Taeho continued. "Maybe what they call primitive is actually something valuable they've lost." That afternoon, Hyejin walked back to her quarters with a heavy heart. But as she passed the recreation area, she saw something interesting. Commander Zeth was standing near the wall that connected to her room. He was breathing deeply through his nose. When he saw her watching, he quickly walked away. But Hai-Jin had seen the expression on his face. For just a moment, he had looked peaceful. Later that evening, as she prepared another batch of cookies, she heard voices through the wall again. "The human smell is back," said the buzzing voice. "Someone should tell her to stop," replied the growling voice of War Chief Grax. "The scent molecules are quite complex," said a new voice that sounded like a computer. "I am analyzing them for potential toxins." But Hai-Jin noticed something else. The voices stayed in the recreation area longer than usual. And when she peeked through her window, she saw several aliens lingering near her door. War Chief Grax stood with his arms crossed, trying to look angry, but his nose kept twitching as he sniffed the air. Commander Zeth pretended to check a wall panel, but his black eyes kept darting toward her door. Even Crix, the crystal being, had positioned itself where the air currents would carry the cookie, sent past its sensors. Late that night, after the voices had finally gone quiet, Hai-Jin found something by her door. It was one of her cookies from lunch, with a small bite taken out of it. Someone had taken it when no one was looking. She smiled as she picked up the half-eaten cookie. Her grandmother Minseo had always said that actions spoke louder than words. These aliens could insult her cooking all they wanted, but their noses and their stomachs were telling a different story. Tomorrow she would bake again, and maybe this time she would leave a few cookies in the recreation area, just by accident. 3 weeks later, Director Kim called Hai-Jin into her office. The older woman looked more tired than usual. "The monthly cultural exchange meeting is today," Director Kim said. "Each department presents something from their species' culture. Last month, the Velthrians showed holographic art that made everyone cry tears of joy. The Korvani performed battle songs that shook the entire station." "What did we humans present?" Hai-Jin asked. Director Kim's face turned red. "I showed them pictures of Earth's mountains and oceans. They said natural landscapes were boring because every planet has rocks and water." Hai-Jin felt her heart sink. "What should I prepare for this month?" "Maybe we should skip it again," Director Kim suggested. "No one expects much from the human department anyway." But Hai-Jin thought about her grandmother's recipe book sitting on her desk. She thought about the half-eaten cookie someone had left by her door. She thought about how the aliens always lingered near her room when she was baking. "I want to volunteer," she said quietly. Director Kim's eyes went wide. "Are you sure? These presentations are in front of all 12 species ambassadors. If you fail, it will be very embarrassing for all humans on the station." "I want to try," Hai-Jin said with more confidence. The cultural exchange meeting was held in the station's largest conference room. Hai-Jin had never seen so many different creatures in one place. The room buzzed with strange languages and stranger sounds. She set up her presentation area in the corner. Unlike the other species' fancy technology displays, she had only a simple table, some chairs, and several plates covered with clean white cloths. Commander Zeth noticed her setup first. "What is the human planning to do with that primitive furniture?" he asked loudly. War Chief Grax snorted. "Probably another slideshow about dirt and trees." A new alien approached the group. This one looked like a floating brain surrounded by glowing energy. Its voice sounded like music played through a computer. "I am Prime Intellect Vox of the Nexari," it announced. "My analysis suggests the human has brought food items. How quaint. Feeding behavior as cultural expression." The other aliens laughed at this. Some made sounds Hai-Jin had never heard before, but she knew they were mocking her. Station Administrator Nexari called the meeting to order. "Today's cultural presentations will begin with the Shardani Collective." Crix moved to the center of the room and began creating beautiful crystal formations that sang with musical tones. The display was breathtaking. Everyone applauded by making their species appreciation sounds. Next, The gaseous Nephili created a light show that told the story of their homeworld's formation. The lights danced through the air like living stars. Again, the audience showed great admiration. One by one, each species presented amazing displays of art, technology, or performance. The Corvani performed a war dance that made the floor shake. The Velthrians projected memories directly into everyone's minds. Finally, it was Hyejin's turn. She walked to her simple table while all eyes watched her. Her hands were shaking, but she took a deep breath and began. "My name is Hyejin, and I want to share something from human culture," she said in a clear voice. "We call it the tradition of sharing meals." She pulled away the first white cloth, revealing dozens of different cookies, breads, and small cakes. The sweet smell immediately filled the room. "These recipes are very old," she continued. "This one came from my great-grandmother during a terrible war on Earth. When people were hungry and scared, she made these cookies to give them hope." Prime intellect. Vox's glowing brain pulsed brighter. Fascinating. The human presents inefficient food preparation as cultural achievement. "Each recipe tells a story," Hyejin said, ignoring the interruption. "This bread was created by farmers who worked hard in the fields. These sweet cakes were made for celebrations when families came together." Commander Zeth moved closer to the table. "Velthrians obtain all necessary nutrients through synthesized compounds. We do not waste time with emotional food preparation." "But these aren't just about nutrition," Hyejin explained. She picked up a small, twisted cookie. "My brother Dongwu learned to make these during his military service. The soldiers were far from home and lonely. Food became their way of remembering family." War Chief Grax crossed his massive arms. "Corvani warriors need no comfort foods. We find strength through battle, not through sweet treats." Hyejin nodded respectfully. "I understand. But may I ask, do Corvani soldiers ever miss their home nests during long campaigns?" For a moment, War Chief Grax's fierce expression softened, but he quickly made his face hard again. "That is not important. Warriors must be strong." "Of course," Hyejin agreed. "Strength is very important, but humans believe that remembering what we're fighting for makes us stronger." She uncovered another plate. These cookies were shaped like small flowers. "My grandmother Minseo taught me this recipe during the hardest time in her life. She had lost her home, her friends, everything. But she still took time to make beautiful food. She said that creating something lovely in dark times was an act of courage." The room had grown quiet. Even the aliens who had been making mocking sounds were listening now. Prime Intellect Vox floated closer to the table. "The molecular complexity of these items is quite remarkable for manual preparation methods. How do you achieve such consistent results without automated systems?" "Practice," Hyejin said simply. "And love. Love is not a measurable ingredient," Prime Intellect Vox stated. "Maybe not," Hyejin replied, "but you can taste it." She began cutting small pieces from each type of food and placing them on individual plates. "In human culture, we believe that sharing food creates bonds between people. Would anyone like to try?" The silence in the room was complete. No one moved toward her table. Commander Zeth spoke first. "Velthrians do not consume primitive organic matter. Corvani digestive systems are designed for combat rations only," War Chief Grax added quickly. "Nexari brains require specific energy frequencies for optimal function," Prime Intellect Vox announced. But even as they gave their excuses, Hyejin noticed something strange. They were all standing much closer to her table now. Commander Zeth's nostrils were flared as if he was breathing deeply. War Chief Grax's eyes kept darting to the flower-shaped cookies. Prime Intellect Vox's energy field was pulsing in rhythm with his speech, which Hyejin had learned meant he was very interested. "In something, I understand," she said gently. "Food traditions are different for every species, but the feelings behind them might be the same." She picked up her grandmother's recipe book and held it carefully. This book survived wars, famines, and the journey to the stars. Not because the food inside was perfect, but because it carried the love of my family through generations. Every species must have something similar, something that connects you to your people and your history. For the first time. Since she started speaking, none of the aliens interrupted her. They stood around her simple table, looking at the handmade food, and for just a moment, the barriers between species seemed a little thinner. The presentation time was over, but nobody moved to leave. The sweet smell of Haye Jin's baking filled the room like a bridge between worlds that had never been connected before. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Haye Jin stood behind her table, watching the aliens stare at her food. No one had taken a bite yet, but no one had left either. Prime Intellect Vox broke the quiet. First, his glowing brain pulsed as he spoke. The aromatic compounds are creating unexpected neural responses in my cognitive centers, he announced. This is highly irregular. Before anyone could respond, his energy field reached out and picked up a small piece of honey cake. The room gasped as he absorbed it into his glowing form. Fascinating, Prime Intellect Vox continued. The molecular structure is indeed inefficient, yet the taste produces pleasant sensations I cannot quantify. Commander Zeth stepped forward, stiffly. You are contaminating yourself with primitive human substances. But even as he said this, Commander Zeth's black eyes were fixed on a golden yakwa cookie. His silver hand moved slowly toward the plate. I am merely conducting scientific analysis, he said, picking up the cookie, to better understand human limitations. He bit into it carefully. His metallic face showed no expression, but his eyes closed for just a moment. When he opened them again, they seemed softer somehow. The texture is unexpected, he admitted quietly. War Chief Grax snorted loudly. Both of you are showing weakness. Corvani warriors would never... His words stopped as Hyejin placed a small plate in front of him. On it was a spiced bread cake, dark and rich with complex flavors. This recipe comes from mountain people on Earth, she said gently. They were warriors too. They needed food that would give them strength during long, cold battles. War Chief, Grax looked down at the bread. His large nostrils flared as he breathed in the spicy scent. Mountain warriors? He asked, his voice less fierce than usual. Yes. They believed that food prepared with honor gave courage to those who ate it. This bread was baked before every important battle. War Chief Grax picked up the bread slowly. He examined it like he was studying a weapon. Then he took a careful bite. His fierce expression changed completely. His eyes went wide, and he took another bite, then another. This tastes like the fire spices from my home nest, he said in wonder. How did you know? I didn't, Hyejin replied honestly. But I thought about what warriors might need. Strength, comfort, and reminders of what they're protecting. Other aliens began moving closer to the table. Crix, the crystal being, floated near a plate of delicate cookies shaped like geometric flowers. These shapes are still imperfect, Crix said, but its voice was softer than before. However, they are pleasing in their irregularity. Crix touched one of the cookies with a crystal tendril. The cookie began to glow softly as it was absorbed. Unexpected, Crix chimed. The imperfect shape creates flavor variations that perfect geometry cannot achieve. Soon, almost every alien in the room was trying Hyejin's food. They still made comments about human primitiveness, but their actions told a different story. They came back for second and third tastes. They asked questions about ingredients and cooking methods. As the evening continued, something magical began to happen. The aliens started talking to each other instead of just to Hyejin. The crystalline structure of these sugar formations is remarkably complex, Prime Intellect Vox said to Crix. Yes, Crix replied. The human has achieved mathematical beauty through intuitive methods rather than calculation. Commander Zeth approached War Chief Grax, holding a piece of soft bread. This texture reminds me of the comfort foods given to Velthrian younglings during their first metamorphosis, he said quietly. War Chief Grax nodded. Corvani cubs receive spiced milk when they are afraid of the dark. We do not speak of it often, but it helps them grow brave. Hyejin listened to these conversations with growing amazement. These beings who had seemed so cold and superior were sharing memories of comfort foods from their own cultures. Prime Intellect Vox floated near the table again. Human Ambassador, I must ask you something. How did you know that the Nexari require foods with complex molecular patterns to achieve satisfaction? I didn't know that, Hyejin said. I just tried to make each recipe with as much care and detail as possible. Fascinating. Your inefficient methods accidentally created efficient results for our biology. A small, furry alien that Hyejin had never seen before crept up to the table. It had been hiding behind the larger beings all evening. Excuse me? It squeaked in a tiny voice. I am Pip of the Zunari. We are a small species, not important. But this food, it makes me remember my family's nest cakes. Hyejin knelt down to Pip's level. Would you like to tell me about nest cakes? Pip's large eyes brightened. We make them when babies are born. Sweet cakes that smell like home flowers. It shows love for new life. That sounds beautiful, Hyejin said. Humans have similar traditions. We bake special cakes for birthdays and celebrations. Soon, Pip was surrounded by other aliens, all listening to stories about Zunari family traditions. Hyejin realized that in all the months since the small alien had been on the station, no one had ever asked about its culture before. The evening was supposed to end at 9 o'clock, but it was nearly midnight when beings finally started leaving. They moved slowly, as if they didn't want the gathering to finish. Commander Zeth was the last to approach Hyejin's table. Most of the food was gone, but a few cookies remained. Human Ambassador, he said formally, I must admit that this experience was educational. Thank you, Commander Zeth. I hope it wasn't too terrible. Commander Zeth picked up one last cookie and studied it carefully. On Velthron, we have a saying, efficiency is the highest virtue. But tonight I learned that some inefficient things create results that pure efficiency cannot achieve. He paused, then added more quietly. These food items triggered memories I had not accessed in many cycles. Memories of being a youngling, receiving comfort crystals from my birth unit when I was afraid or sad. Those sound like precious memories, Hyejin said gently. They are memories I had classified as unimportant, Commander Zeth replied. But tonight they felt valuable again. As Hyejin packed up her empty plates, she felt a warmth in her heart that had nothing to do with the kitchen ovens. The aliens had spent the entire evening saying her food was primitive and inefficient. But they had also spent the entire evening eating it, enjoying it, and sharing their own stories because of it. Her grandmother Min Seo had been right. The best way to reach someone's heart was through their stomach. But more than that, food had a way of reminding people of their own capacity for love, comfort, and connection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had proven something important. Beneath all their advanced technology and superior attitudes, these aliens were not so different from humans after all. 3 days after the cultural exchange, Hyejin woke up to the loudest alarm she had ever heard. Red lights flashed in her room as the station's emergency system blared warnings in 12 different languages. She rushed to her door and found chaos in the hallway. Aliens were running in all directions, some screaming, others making sounds of panic she had never heard before. Tae-ho appeared at her side, his face pale with worry. Solar storm, he shouted over the noise. A massive one hit the station too, hours ago. It fried the main food synthesis systems. What does that mean? Hyejin asked, though she was afraid she already knew. It means we're all going to be very hungry very soon. The emergency meeting was called for all residents. Station Administrator Vox floated at the front of the main assembly hall, his usual musical voice now sounding strained and worried. The solar storm has damaged our primary food production systems beyond immediate repair, he announced. Backup systems can only produce basic nutritional paste. Repair teams estimate 3 weeks before full function is restored. A wave of worried sounds swept through the crowd. Different species made different noises of distress, but the fear was universal. The nutritional paste will keep you alive, Administrator Vox continued, but it cannot provide the specific dietary requirements that many species need for optimal health. War Chief Grax stood up, his massive form towering over everyone else. How long before Corvani warriors begin to weaken on this paste? He demanded. Our analysis suggests significant strength loss within 10 days, Administrator Vox replied. Commander Zeth's metallic voice cut through the murmur of worried conversations. Velthrian metabolism requires precise mineral balances. This paste cannot provide adequate nutrition for our species. The same is true for all of us, Administrator Vox said sadly. The Nexari need specific energy frequencies. The Shardani require crystalline structures. The Zunari must have aromatic compounds for proper digestion. Hyajin listened to the growing panic around her. Each species was discovering that their advanced evolution had made them dependent on very specific types of food. The simple paste that could keep them alive would slowly make them weak and sick. But humans, with their primitive digestive systems, could survive on almost anything. After the meeting, Hyajin walked slowly back to her quarters. The hallways were full of worried aliens, many looking more frightened than she had ever seen them. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Commander Zeth standing in the corridor. He looked uncomfortable, like he would rather be anywhere else. "Human ambassador," he said formally. "I require assistance." "Of course, Commander Zeth. How can I help?" Commander Zeth's black eyes looked at the floor. Velthrian younglings become ill when they cannot access comfort crystals during times of stress. The nutritional paste contains no crystalline structures. My youngling crew members are already showing signs of distress. Hyajin thought about the cookies she had shared a few days ago, the ones that had reminded Commander Zeth of his own comfort crystals. Would hardened sugar crystals help? She asked. I could make cookies with crystal-like structures using human baking methods. Commander Zeth's head snapped up. You would do this? For Velthrian younglings? Of course. We're all stuck on this station together. An hour later, War Chief Grax appeared at her door. The massive warrior looked embarrassed and angry at the same time. Human, he growled. My warriors are asking about the spiced bread you made. The paste has no flavor, no strength. My soldiers are losing their fighting spirit. I could help you make bread with Corvani spices, Hyajin offered. If you can tell me what flavors remind your warriors of home. War Chief Grax's fierce expression softened slightly. You would help Corvani warriors, even after we insulted your food traditions? Food isn't about insults or pride, Hyajin said gently. It's about taking care of each other. By evening, Hyajin's small quarters had become the busiest place on the station. Aliens who had barely spoken to her before were lining up outside her door, asking for help. Prime Intellect Vox wanted to know if human cooking methods could create the complex molecular patterns that Nexari brains needed. Crix asked if geometric cookie shapes could be made more mathematically perfect. Even Tiny Pip squeaked requests for nest cake recipes that might work with the limited ingredients available. I can't solve all of these problems by myself, Hyajin told the crowd gathered outside her door. But maybe we can work together. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Instead of each species trying to solve their food crisis alone, they would combine their knowledge and skills. Commander Zeth could use his advanced chemistry knowledge to analyze which combinations of available ingredients would create the mineral balances Velthrians needed. War Chief Grax could apply Corvani food preservation techniques to make meals that would maintain warrior strength. Prime Intellect Vox could calculate optimal molecular structures for nutrition, and Haye Jin would teach them all the human art of cooking with love, creativity, and hope. The first group cooking session was scheduled for the next morning in the main recreation area. Haye Jin spent the night making lists of recipes that could be adapted for different species' needs. But as she lay in bed, she couldn't help smiling. 3 weeks ago, these aliens had called human food traditions primitive and worthless. Now, they were begging her to teach them those same traditions. Her grandmother Min Seo would have laughed at the irony. Sometimes, she used to say, people don't know what they need until everything else is taken away. The solar storm had taken away the aliens' advanced food technology, but maybe, just maybe, it had given them something more valuable in return. A chance to learn that the most important ingredient in any meal wasn't efficiency or perfection, it was caring for each other. The next morning would bring new challenges, 12 different species with 12 different dietary needs, all depending on primitive human cooking methods to survive. But for the first time since arriving on the station, Haye Jin felt truly useful. She had something to offer that no advanced technology could replace, the knowledge of how to create nourishment, comfort, and hope from simple ingredients and genuine care. The crisis that was meant to weaken them all might actually make them stronger. Together. As she drifted off to sleep, the sweet smell of tomorrow's baking already seemed to fill the air. And in the hallway outside, she could hear the quiet voices of aliens from different worlds, making plans to cook together for the first time in galactic history. The revolution would begin in the kitchen, and it would be led by a human grandmother's recipe book and a young woman who believed that food was just love made visible. The main recreation area had never seen anything like it. What was once a sterile meeting space had been transformed into the galaxy's first interspecies kitchen. Commander Zeth stood at one station, carefully measuring minerals into cookie dough, while explaining Velthrian chemistry to a fascinated group of Zunari. His silver hands moved with surprising grace as he shaped the dough into perfect crystalline forms. "The calcium carbonate must be distributed evenly," he explained in his metallic voice. "But the human technique of folding rather than mixing creates better integration than our automated systems." At another station, War Chief Grax was teaching Shardani delegates how to knead bread. His massive claws, which had once seemed so frightening, worked the dough with gentle precision. "Corvani bread-making is about strength and patience," he rumbled. "Like training young warriors, you must be firm but not harsh, determined but not violent." Crix floated nearby, its crystal body flashing with excitement as it learned to create geometric pastries. "The mathematical precision is remarkable," it chimed. "Human intuition achieves results that our calculated methods cannot replicate." Prime Intellect Vox had become the group's analyzer, studying each recipe and suggesting modifications for different species' nutritional needs. His glowing brain pulsed rapidly as he worked. Fascinating. If we increase the protein molecules by 15% and add these crystalline structures, this bread can meet both Corvani strength requirements and Velthrian mineral needs. But the real surprise was how much the aliens enjoyed working together. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now sharing techniques, trading ingredients, and laughing at their mistakes. Pip, the tiny Zunari, had become everyone's favorite assistant. Its small size allowed it to reach into tight spaces and perform delicate decorating work that larger beings couldn't manage. "Pip makes the most beautiful flower patterns," Hyejin announced, holding up a cake decorated with tiny, perfect sugar flowers. The little alien glowed with pride as the others praised its work. 3 weeks passed quickly. Every day brought new discoveries and improvements. Commander Zeth learned that Velthrian efficiency could be enhanced by human creativity. War Chief Grax discovered that sharing meals actually made his warriors stronger, not weaker. Prime Intellect Vox found that the unmeasurable ingredient called love actually had measurable effects on nutrition and satisfaction. But the biggest changes weren't in the food. They were in the relationships between species, the Corvani and Velthrians, who had competed for centuries over military superiority, began working together to create foods that combined strength and precision. The intellectual Nexari started asking other species for their opinions instead of assuming they knew everything. The proud Shardani began appreciating the beauty in imperfection. When the station's food synthesis systems were finally repaired, a remarkable thing happened. Nobody wanted to use them. The automated systems can create nutritional efficiency, Commander Zeth announced at the evening meal gathering. But they cannot create this. He gestured to the crowded recreation area, where dozens of beings from different worlds sat together, sharing food and stories. I agree, War Chief Grax added. My warriors are stronger now than they have ever been, not because of the food alone, but because they fight for friends, not just duty. Station Administrator Vox floated at the front of the room. His usual formal manner had softened over the past 3 weeks. The Galactic Council has been monitoring our station during the crisis, he announced. They expected chaos, fighting, and failure. Instead, they observed the most successful interspecies cooperation in galactic history. A cheer went up from the crowd, with each species making their own sounds of celebration. Furthermore, Administrator Vox continued, they have asked us to establish the first interspecies cultural harmony program with human methods as the foundation. All eyes turned to Hye Jin, who was standing near the kitchen area with flour still on her apron and a warm smile on her face. Ambassador Hye Jin, Administrator Vox said formally, the Galactic Council offers you the position of Director of Interspecies Cultural Harmony for the entire galactic community. The room erupted in cheers again. Aliens who had once called her primitive were now celebrating her promotion to one of the highest positions in galactic diplomacy. Hye Jin felt tears in her eyes as she looked around the room. Commander Zeth was applauding with his metallic hands. War Chief Grax was pounding the table in approval. Prime Intellect Vox was glowing brighter than she had ever seen him. Even Tiny Pip was jumping up and down with joy. I accept, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. But I have one condition. The room fell quiet, waiting for her terms. My office must have a kitchen. The laughter that followed was the most beautiful sound Hye Jin had ever heard. It was the sound of beings from across the galaxy sharing joy together. 6 months later, the Galactic Diplomatic Station had become famous throughout known space as the Cookie Station. Representatives from dozens of species came to learn the human techniques of cultural harmony through shared meals. Commander Zeth had established the first Velthrian cultural kitchen on his homeworld, teaching young Velthrians that efficiency and emotion could work together. War Chief Grax implemented traditional food-sharing rituals in Corvani military units, discovering that warriors who ate together fought more effectively as teams. Prime Intellect Vox published a groundbreaking research paper titled The Efficiency of Inefficiency: How Emotional Food Preparation Enhances Social Bonding and Productivity. It became required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. But the most important change was in the station itself. The sterile corridors now carried the warm smells of cooking from dozens of different cultures. The recreation areas were full of laughter and conversation. Beings who had once avoided each other now gathered every evening to share meals and stories. Hye Jin stood in her new office, looking out at the stars through the large window. Her desk was covered with requests from species across the galaxy, all wanting to learn about human food traditions. But her favorite part of the office was still the kitchen area, where she could bake cookies for visitors and friends. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Tai Ho standing in the doorway, holding a familiar worn book. "I found this in your old quarters," he said, holding up her grandmother's recipe book. Thought you might want it in your new office. Hye-jin took the book carefully and placed it on her desk next to her official Galactic Council documents. You know, Taeho said with a smile, when you first arrived, some people thought you were crazy for trying to change minds with cookies. I never tried to change anyone's mind, Hye-jin replied, looking out at the bustling station corridors. I just offered them cookies. They changed their own minds. What's the difference? Hye-jin thought about her grandmother Min-seo, about the wisdom contained in an old recipe book about the power of genuine kindness offered without expectation of return. The difference is choice, she said finally. You can't force someone to change, but you can give them a reason to want to change. You can show them something better than what they had before. As if summoned by their conversation, Commander Zeth appeared in the doorway carrying a tray of cookies shaped like tiny crystalline structures. Human Director, he said formally, though his black eyes sparkled with warmth. I have brought the afternoon refreshments for your office meetings. Thank you, Commander Zeth. They look perfect. I have been practicing the technique you taught. Me. Precision with passion. Efficiency with emotion. After he left, Taeho shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, he called human food traditions primitive. Now he's baking cookies for your office meetings. 6 months ago, he was right, Hye-jin said. Human food traditions are primitive, but sometimes primitive things have wisdom that advanced things have forgotten. She opened her grandmother's recipe book and looked at the handwritten pages, yellowed with age, but still full of love. Sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer, and sometimes the most powerful way to change the galaxy is one cookie at a time. The sweet smell of Commander Zeth's cookies filled the office as Hye-jin prepared for her next meeting. Outside her window, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was slowly learning an ancient human truth. The best way to make friends was to share a meal, and in the kitchen areas throughout the station, beings from a dozen different worlds were learning to cook together, proving every day that despite their differences in technology, biology, and culture, they all shared the same need for comfort, community, and care. The revolution that began with insults and cookies had become something beautiful, a galaxy learning to taste love.